another edition of the 81 All Out podcast. I'm Sidvi, and I'm happy to be joined by three of our regulars, Mahesh, who's cornered on Twitter, Ananta, who is Ananta on Twitter, and Max. You can follow him on Twitter as well, Max Da Vinci. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
So today we plan to go on a nostalgia trip back to 1992 and talk about the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. For many cricket fans, and I guess of a certain age, maybe even, it was an iconic World Cup for several reasons. It was the first World Cup where the games were played under lights. There was the first time teams were wearing colored clothing in the World Cup. There were also new regulations that had come in just before that in terms of fielding restrictions and all that. In a way, I think one can look at it as an inflection point for ODIs, where you have black and white ODIs and then you have color ODIs either side of this World Cup. I mean, of course, this is just roughly. Cricket was played in white. One-dayers were played in white clothing much after that. But I think this can be seen as a rough inflection point. And even today, there'll be some game somewhere in the world where there'll be one guy wearing that 1992 World Cup jersey of some country. Immediately people will see that, and there'll be a severe nostalgia trip on Twitter and other places where people will remember that World Cup. So I think, irrespective of why, I think there remains a reason why there remains that World Cup remains pretty large in people's memories. And through this podcast, we plan to revisit that tournament, the games, as well as the contests and the main moments. But also, we want to bring out some personal touches, our own stage in our lives where we were, how we will remember the World Cup, because sporting memory is not only related to what players do on the field and what happens out there, but also has a personal touch, and everyone has a unique sporting memory. So we'll also be bringing out a bit of that. So, all right, guys, with that, let's get on to the podcast. And maybe we can start with Ananta, who's probably the oldest on the in this group here. So what was your life stage then, and how do you remember that World Cup from a personal standpoint?
So, okay, first of all, thanks for being ageist and labeling me that as the oldest person.
Well, that's a fact.
Right. So like I was in the 8th standard, I think. And it was kind of a transition phase in life where, that was a point when, studies were being thrust on me. Till then it was not much pressure at home, but then that's around the time people started putting pressure, and cricket was not a very popular thing at home, and we didn't have a cable connection before that. But then my brother got married, my cousin. We were living as a joint family. He got married, and he was essentially the person that got a cable connection at home, and he forced people to get a cable connection at home. He was also responsible for the cricket interest that I have now, because he used to work in a bank, and pretty much every week the sports star used to be delivered at home, and he used to be the last person that took it home. So he used to keep it for himself after everybody's read it. So he was the kind of person that actually got interest in cricket for me. But having said that, I remember this World Cup very fondly. As you said, it was probably the first World Cup in color. First World Cup I really saw on color TVs. Prior to that, we only had a black and white TV at home. So that is one. And it was also one of those, probably the first World Cup for me that I could watch snatches of once I got home in the evening for a few hours before my mom got home. Because I think most of the games were day and nighters, and we could watch at least an hour or so once we got back home. So that was a nice thing. Couple of interesting things happened. I think the second or the third game of the World Cup was Pakistan versus West Indies on a Sunday. I distinctly remember that match for a couple of reasons. One, watching Brian Lara get retired hurt after getting hit on the foot by a Yorker from, I believe, Akib Javed, I think, because that's what my memory tells me. And the same afternoon, some guy walked into our flat and took away my cycle. I mean, he stole my cycle, bicycle that my dad had got for me like a couple of months ago. And my father was livid because, one, I had not locked the cycle even though it was inside. I mean, it was in our gate, but I had not locked the cycle. Two, I had been watching cricket when it happened. Yeah, and this was also the time. I mean, people that knew me during my school and college days will probably remember that I used to wear. I mean, a hat was part of my wardrobe. And the Benson and Hedges World Cup logo, I found a hat in Pondy Bazaar around the time of the World Cup, and that was my treasured possession for almost next 2 years. I used to wear it all the time. So this is another reason why this World Cup is kind of close to me.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Benson and Hedges, I remember that that was huge at the time, right? Because it was sponsoring the World Cup, and also, at that time it was pretty normal for cigarette companies to sponsor cricket. Wills sponsored '96, and then you had, and I had no idea what Benson and Hedges was back then. I mean, I'm the second oldest person on this podcast, so I was 10 or 11, 10 at that time. I had no idea what Benson and Hedges was. I just thought it was it just sounded like some fancy company, but I didn't know anything about it being a cigarette company. But then I used to play cricket along with a group of guys, and some of them were older guys, some of them were high school, and guys who were in 11th standard, 12th standard. So guys who had sort of already had their first cigarette and things like that. And I remember during that World Cup, Benson and Hedges cigarettes were really costly, right, in India. I mean, the easiest for students to smoke was probably then BDs or maybe even Wills or something like that. But there were this group of three guys who had this aspiration to smoke Benson and Hedges cigarettes during that World Cup. And that's the first time I realized what Benson and Hedges was. And I'm like, oh, okay, these guys are sponsoring the World Cup. So, yeah, just a little tiny memory from my end. So, two memories that come to my mind, and both from a personal touch, was one was, I mean, of course, as Ananta said, I didn't watch many of the games because I was in school, and I was many of the games were day night games. So timings wise, I didn't get to watch them. But South Africa, Australia, that was the first match South Africa played in the World Cup. And, we had seen South Africa play in India, where they came to India. They played really well in one day where they beat India by chasing a big score in Delhi. But, didn't really expect them to do that well in the World Cup because, they come and lost to India. So, and India was not going to do much in the World Cup. So South Africa would probably do worse than India was, of course, my thinking. But then they played against Australia, and then I was in school, and then I came back, and I was shocked to learn that they'd beaten Australia. And this was even more shocking because India had stayed that whole Australian summer there, and they had lost so many games. And then suddenly South Africa comes and beats Australia. And my granddad, who watched that game, was so impressed that he almost gave me like a over by over report. I mean, that's just my memory. Obviously, it wasn't over by over, but he gave me such a detailed report of the match that I felt I'd seen pretty much all of it. And so I have absolutely I didn't watch a single ball of that match. I mean, I've seen a bit of clips here and there, but all my memories of my granddad telling me about South Africa's fielding and how good they were, Kepler Wessel's batting, and how Australia were overwhelmed and all that. And that was a heavy defeat for Australia. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, not heavy, but pretty heavy defeat. It was not a close game by any standards. And then there was that India-Australia thriller, of course, in Brisbane, which I think became a thriller because of that rain rule. If not for that rain rule, India would not have had that stiff a target. And then my dad, who hardly watched cricket at the time, he was watching towards the last few parts of that that match, and India needed I think 4 to win of the last ball or something, and which meant 3 to tie. And Raju was walking in as the last batsman, And so basically, he was not on strike. So all that Raju was walking in for was for running. He had to, get in there. And Raju came in with pads and all geared up and all. And my dad was furious. He's like, why is this guy walking in with pads? All he needs to do is run. He should just walk in without pads. And as it happened, I mean, I didn't know then, but there's no rule in cricket that says a batsman has to walk in with pads, right? He can walk in, however, like he can walk in without pads. And as it happened, Srinath hit that ball, Steve Waugh dropped it, and then this guy gets run out when they're going for the third run, when India could have tied the game. So, and that whole thing of not wearing the pads was stuck in my head because, why was he wearing pads? He probably would have made his ground if he had not worn the pads. So, these are like the memories that come to my head from this.
One of the reasons that he did not make it for the third run is also because as soon as Srinath hit, when he was running, he was wildly celebrating when he took the first run. I distinctly remember that. So he didn't expect the ball to be caught, or at least go into Steve Waugh's hands. He probably thought as soon as Srinath hit it and he saw the ball fly, he thought it was 6 and he started celebrating. He was gesticulating widely while he ran. That's also one reason why the third run did not happen.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really good shot, to be fair to Srinath. But those grounds were the Gabba is a big ground. And, those days you didn't have ropes inside and all that. So it was pretty silly of Raju to celebrate so early. Mahesh, I guess, who's next in line.
So I have in the sense that my memory of World Cup is all clubbed into the whole memory of the India tour of Australia. So, I mean, that was a very weird tour also, right? They played one days in the beginning, then they played test matches in between. Again, they played one days and they played test matches later. So it's all like mixed up. Thankfully, they had different jerseys. So if they had same jerseys, I'm sure I'll mix up my memories of the World Cup with those one-day matches as well. So largely, I went into the World Cup very excited to watch David Boon. I was madly in love with David Boon, so to say, because the way the guy was square cutting just captured my imagination. That was probably the first time I was watching cricket fully understanding the rules, so to say. I had watched it before with my family, with my brothers. But even then, my brothers were a big influence on the way I was watching cricket. Like, even before I could see a single ball of Dean Jones, I already knew he was this great one-day batsman because my brother said so. I had no idea at that time that he was a great one-day batsman. So, for instance, when he was playing against us in the World Cup, I think he hit a couple of sixes, or at least one six that I remember very well. I was like, boss, I've never seen anything like this before. So I was finding validation for a lot of things that I heard from others, especially my brother, who was 7 years older to me. So in the sense, it was really a World Cup, which is a very family experience for me. It was just all of us sitting together, talking and kind of sharing with each other of their opinions and their facts and knowledge. Some of the stats that my brother would throw at me will kind of stump me. And the other thing that I remember distinctly is following Zimbabwe very closely. For some reason, whenever we used to play book cricket during those times, I always chose Zimbabwe. I don't know why, but I just liked choosing Zimbabwe for book cricket as mine. So I was very fascinated with watching Zimbabwe as well. I remember we woke up quite early for the India-Zimbabwe match because that happened in New Zealand, if I'm not wrong, and Hamilton actually.
Oh yeah, that was a very good match actually. Even though there was rain, thrilling match.
Yeah. So we got up and I was very thrilled to watch Zimbabwe play against India. And I think our Zimbabwe-India match was a little after the Zimbabwe-Sri Lanka match, which I don't remember watching, but we were listening to on radio. I don't know why we were listening to on radio. I have no memory. Did we have satellite television at that time, or were it all telecast on Doordarshan? I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure there was a lot shown on. I saw a lot on DD. I'm not sure if we had the Prime Sports by then.
Yeah, even I'm not sure. It's all very vague.
No, and we had Prime Sports. And for a long time after that World Cup, Prime Sports used to show like 4 p.m. in the afternoon, in the evening. They used to show like half-hour highlights of key games, and that was part of the standard programming on a daily basis.
Possible, but I remember, watching a lot of the highlights, and they used to have that program called World This Week, and there's one more called Sports something, for basically a catch-up of what happened in the sporting world for the last week in Doordarshan. World This Week was hosted by Pranay Roy, of course, and there was a similar program for sports, I forgot. Anyway, coming back to the India-Zimbabwe one, I was very excited, and we all got up in the morning, me, my dad, my brothers, everybody, and I was more like excited for Zimbabwe because I had heard these names and they sounded so unique and exotic to me. And I was so disappointed that there was a bit of a rain delay. And those days you don't really get to know the status like the way you do now, right? It's not like they're showing live telecast throughout. There's one update you get and that's about it. And after a bit of a delay, I remember Kapil walked out to open and he hit a 6 like of Edu Brandes, if I'm not wrong. It's like my memory of Hamilton is that. That's my first memory of a city called Hamilton. Since then till now, when anybody utters the word Hamilton, the first image that comes back to my mind is that Kapil Dev 6.
It was interesting. This Kapil Dev thing is that the whole by then Mark Greatbatch had really lit up that World Cup, right, by opening and pinch hitting and all that. I think and then Ian Botham had opened for England, and so all these teams were trying to send like their big hitter up now. And Kapil Dev was the Indian experiment, who was actually supposed to also open against Sri Lanka, another place, Mekke, which the only connection I have with that place is this India-Sri Lanka match where basically some 2 balls were bowled or something, or 1 ball was bowled, and it was rained out. And Kapil Dev and Srikkanth opened, and so there was big anticipation there. And then he opened in this game, and of course this Zimbabwe connection was of course with Kapil with Tunbridge Wells, and everyone was saying, okay, maybe he'll open and make another like a big 100 and all that, and then he gets up to LBW for 10.
So Srikanth's name is linked to Mekke forever because he scored the only international runs in that ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Only 2 balls were bowled.
2 balls. Yeah.
Among the many firsts in Srikanth's career.
So, Srikanth, right? I didn't realize he played only 5 matches in this World Cup. He had a very on and off World Series Cup prior to the World Cup, and he had very good games, very bad games. But this World Cup was a big washout for him.
But I thought he did reasonably well in the Tri-Series before.
It was still a up and down series for him because he had, I think, 250s and like 240s or something, but he had a couple of single-digit scores as well. He still finished with like 30 odd average in that, if I remember right. Because Srikanth was one of my favorite cricketers.
30 odd average is quite substantial during those seasons.
Correct. So Srikanth was one of my favorite cricketers at that point. But in '92 World Cup, I think that was the end, right? He didn't play after that.
But Srikkanth, Srikkanth, of course, through that whole summer, it was like his sniffing got even more pronounced with every game. He kept, that looking up to the sky and sniffling and that doing that
walking to square leg,
that famous tick that he had.
Yeah.
I'd of course seen that before. That was a famous Srikkanth move, but it just seemed that particular summer he was doing it like out of vengeance, almost like okay.
Maybe he liked watching himself on the Channel 9 coverage so much. He thought it looked cool. In fact, I remember Ravina Tandon in one of the interviews when she was asked about, in one of those 83 World Cup celebratory videos was asked, who's your favorite Indian cricketer growing up? And she mentioned Srikkanth, and she mentioned Srikkanth precisely for these reasons, especially for his mannerisms, the way he moved around the crease, looked at the sun and did something with his nose, like sniffing and stuff.
There was a lot going on with him. I mean, it was like, back then for those who know, the mantrams, they'll know that my granddad used to keep saying that in the Srikkanth, when the Achudaya Nama, Anandaya Nama, Govindaya Nama, he has to finish that whole thing and only then he has to start batting. Yeah, and of course Srikkanth, again, that match against New Zealand where Deepak Patel opens the bowling, and of course Srikkanth against spin was like Virendra Sehwag against spin almost. But
that was Rod Latham catcher.
Rod Latham, only fielder in the deep.
Yeah, so that was the other memory, and everyone is like, oh no, and I think he made a duck, right? So people were that he would make, he would use the field restrictions and go after the spinner and all that, and then he's just gone. I mean, sometimes in retrospect, I just wonder, instead of that Kapil Dev experiment that they did, Kapil was obviously the most logical choice. But imagine if they tried Sachin then and not in '94, maybe India would have gone a little further ahead in that World Cup.
Yeah, possible. He had a couple of good games as well. He had a good Tri-Series before.
He had a good Tri-Series, and it just seemed that he wasn't getting enough balls, right? Like he always used to come in too late.
Number 6, I think.
Yeah, then gradually moved to number 4, and in the World Cup he batted 4 in some games.
Yeah, 4 and 5 he was batting. Yeah.
Max, we don't want to silence you. Please say something.
No, for me, the '92 World Cup was probably my first memory of, proper watching a full game of cricket. I mean, I've seen only videos or something until then, but I've never sat and watched a full game, like waking up early in the morning and watching a full game before going to school, or on weekend for watching the entire game. I think, and some days there were even 2 games. So watching it all the way from like 2 in the morning to like 2 in the afternoon or 3 in the afternoon. This was my first time ever watching a proper ODI game, and again, it was in colored clothing, and I was totally wowed at what the hell is this? It was so new to me, and I think I was like second standard or something. So I was just soaking in, which is why those I might have watched, let's say maybe like 8 or 9 games fully, but those 8 or 9 games I can recollect even now as if I just watched it, the highlights now on YouTube. And so that's why this World Cup is always very special to me. For me, New Zealand was my team. And I was just amazed by the way Greatbatch and Deepak Patel, and it was such a game changing. This had a lot of close games. At least that's how my memory serves. At that time, and I was not like, oh, India fan or this fan or thing. So for me, it was just the game. I just understood the game. So as long as the game was close, I was hooked. Which is why for me, I recollect having the maximum number of close games in this World Cup and very few one-siders. And of course, and there were quiz questions later for the whole most productive over theory of calculating the rained-out games versus the average runs per over, which was before. So a lot of quiz questions also came out of this.
Interesting that you talk about close games, because that day I was just doing a little bit of, I was just looking at all the results from comparing 87 to 92. And it's amazing how many close games 87 had compared to 92. And I'm talking like nail biters. Like I'm talking 1 run and 1 wicket, and like games that went to like the very end, compared to 92, which did have a few close games. I mean, India Australia was 1 run and all that, but overall, if you look at it, it wasn't that close. Of course, it wasn't that one-sided either. There were games which were in the sort of mid-range in terms of results. If you see New Zealand, they hardly, apart from the semi-final, which got really close at one point, they didn't really get into too many close situations. Similarly with England, I mean, they lost to Zimbabwe, but apart from that, there was that India game which was pretty close. But apart from that, England won many of their games pretty outright. So yeah, I'm just saying that even in my head, it was exactly as what Max was saying, that there were quite a few close games. But I guess if you compare across World Cups, it'll be interesting to see which World Cup had the most thrilling set of games.
Well, 87 and below is blanked out because I was in diapers in 87, so I cannot even say.
Come on, you didn't have diapers back then. Liar.
Well, I guess
we did.
We may all sound like kids talking about a grand event, but we'll make sure to get people of different ages to talk about other World Cups as well, so so that we get different perspectives. But I want to get to one point about why. I mean, it's probably true with your friend circle as well. It's definitely true with mine, that this is by and large the most favorite World Cup for many people in my circle and among my group of friends. Why is this? I mean, is it just because of the novelty factor, or is there something else, or is it just because of life stage, or is there anything that you guys can think of?
I think it's got to do with life stage and the novelty factor, like colored cricket, day-night cricket, and also like for me, it was my first initiation almost, which is why it's so special for me. Now, for you guys, since you guys were maybe a little older, you guys must remember more about this because you know more about the game and all that. I was just sitting and watching since early in the morning because with my dad, so. I don't remember a lot of the understanding of a lot of the things, but I just remember watching. And it's from this time is when I first saw Chris Harris, and I've never liked him even till the day he retired. I always thought that, and same thing happened to book cricket. If no one would ever pick Chris Harris, and our rule would be that if you lose 2 games, then next time in your team, you have to have Chris Harris.
Okay. You guys had book cricket. I mean, we had the equivalent in terms of when we were playing on the ground. Around that World Cup was when we started playing like often when there was only 2 guys. you would play like each guy would play like a full team. So suppose I was playing New Zealand and the other guy was playing say Australia or South Africa. So then you had to bowl like all the bowlers, right? So you bowl one over like Chris Harris, one over like Gavin Larson, and one over like this, one over like that. And I used to be a pretty bad bowler back then. I mean, I hardly could get the ball to the other end. But yeah, whenever some guys used to hit Gavin Larson, I used to get damn angry because I used to be like, what the hell? You're not supposed to hit Gavin Larson and you're hitting him. Why are you hitting him? He's supposed to be restrictive. And they're like, no, it's nothing to do with Gavin Larson. It's to do with your shit bowling. So don't worry. So I assume that when you bowl like a bowler, they would treat you like they would treat the actual bowler. So, yeah. That was quite nice.
So did you also bat like the respective positions? Like if you had to, like if you were number 11 and if you are Courtney Walsh, do you also?
Oh yeah. You have to bat like Walsh. You have to imitate that player. So yeah, like Walsh can't suddenly start playing like forward defensive, really well and all. You have to just play as if you're swinging.
Interesting. I like this format.
Yeah. This used to be damn popular during the day. During the day, there used to be not that many people. Only in the evenings, the whole group will come. So during the day, especially if it's like holidays and all, there'll just be two guys. So you play a team against. You can kill a lot of time through the day as well. Coming back to that, the point though, Mahesh and Ananta, do you have any other reasons why this is so, or is it just our group is our age and maybe there are people older and younger who don't really?
Not just our group. In fact, I mean, our group is understandable because it is the first colored World Cup with Channel 9 coverage. And it's like a really nice format, and Pakistan coming from nowhere to win the World Cup, great story and some really good bowling performances as well. So, I mean, I can understand why a certain age group likes this World Cup, let's say compared to 96, for instance. But there's a larger consensus around this being, if not the best World Cup, but just like a great World Cup, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with the format, with the 9 teams playing each other rather than round robin and going around it. So that kind of gave a sense of depth to the format. Big factor more than innovation is one-day cricket at large in those Australian big grounds were always good to watch. You think about 85, you think about even the tri-series that they played every year. Till, in fact, I don't know how many, I'm sure it's the same for all of us, that we were watching every match of that tri-series even when India was not playing. There was that iconic West Indies, Pakistan, Australia tri-series in which Afridi kind of announced himself. Yeah, much later there was that Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, where there were some splendid matches. So the large grounds lent itself to one-day cricket very nicely. It kind of tilted the balance more in favor of the bowlers. I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
And I also feel it's the TV coverage, because somehow in my memory, it seems that when I think of 87 or when I think of watching cricket India, not only in India, even when there was always like poor transmission, or the coverage wasn't high quality in my memory. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but that World Cup somehow seems that there were very few interruptions and quality of the images were really good, and or maybe just because it was color, I'm not sure. There was something about the TV experience as well.
So my only problem with that conclusion or with that reasoning is that while for the World Cup it's a new experience, for cricket at large it's not, right? I mean, just a month back they were playing pretty much in the same grounds with the same colored clothing, with the same quality of TV coverage and commentary as well. We are not, that can't be the line where we draw saying this is when it started, because at least cricket in Australia was like that even without the World Cup.
Yeah, sure. I don't think, in fact, I don't think the World Cup is as beloved in Australia as it is in other parts for that same reason, because they have seen many of this. For them, it's not novelty as much as it was for us in the World Cup scheme of.
So personally, right? So I think, as Sidhu is saying, it is not new for Australia, but it's certainly new for us. Again, we have also seen parts of this in 85 during the World Championship of Cricket, I think, which also had good coverage in India because of it being a tour. But personally speaking, this World Cup is kind of etched in my mind purely because this was probably the first World Cup for me where I had a ton of repeat watching of these matches, even if it means just the highlights, right? So I was just like I was saying earlier, after the World Cup, for the next 1 year or so, when we had the Prime Sports highlights package literally every day. So I must have watched that Australia-India highlights so many different times. So to me also, the clothing was a big draw. I still think this is the best ever team colors that we've had, jersey colors that we've had, not just for India, for everybody for that matter. That and the grounds being what they are. I mean, Australia has always been a good location for cricket watching on TV, at least, because the coverage is so good, the colors are so vibrant.
Threw up its own surprises, right? I mean, so many surprises. Like Australia didn't do as well as they would have probably been expected to at home in a home World Cup, especially after winning the previous edition and, being a pretty good side for that time. And then New Zealand throw up this huge surprise by doing so well. Of course, we had the Pakistan story towards the latter stages. And South Africa coming in for the first time and then giving such a good account of themselves. I think all that was adds to it as well. The surprise factors that came in with the World Cup.
Talking of New Zealand, I don't remember this particularly well. I mean, I remember the fact that they had a phenomenal World Cup, and to me, although I loved Pakistan at that time, I was really disappointed that New Zealand couldn't go on to win the World Cup because they had such a phenomenal run. But did you sense, like with Sri Lanka, for instance, in '96, after the tri-series performance, and not necessarily they did not win, but there was some hints of what is to come. If you were watching New Zealand prior to that World Cup, did you have any sense of the fact that they were going to go on this impressive run?
No, I don't even remember watching much of New Zealand before that World Cup. I mean, I don't know why, because maybe I don't even know which series they played, honestly. But maybe because we didn't get the coverage, or I just wasn't clued in enough. That was a surprise for me at the time. Definitely. I mean, we all knew New Zealand were a good team. They weren't like, they weren't as if they were Kenya in '96 or something. But still, for New Zealand to be winning game after game after game was a surprise for me, definitely. And also, I think the tactical points, right? I mean, of course, a lot of it may be revisionism. I mean, I haven't really checked every single one of Deepak Patel's spells and whether he actually bowled some phenomenal spells. I'm pretty sure he took some very important wickets at the top of the order, and somehow he seemed to throw opponents off their guard. But of course, you could well make a statistical analysis that everything about Deepak Patel is all overstated and all that. But the fact is that these were surprises that were adding to the story. And Greatbatch, again, I mean, it's not like Greatbatch came and made a 40-ball 100 or anything at any point of time. But still, that Mark Greatbatch, who had made the only thing that I associated with Mark Greatbatch till then was that great dead batting, stonewalling innings he had made at Perth in the late 80s to draw New Zealand a match. And that was a big deal because there was a lot of coverage in Sports Star and Hindu about that. And it was like Mark Greatbatch till then. And then he comes and he's promoted and he suddenly starts. And this is a big guy, right? Like he was massive, both in bulk as well as in height. He starts belting everyone with that left-handed style. It was amazing, man.
Crowe actually had a much better tournament than Greatbatch, but Greatbatch is more etched in memories because of the number of sixes he was hitting.
They played mostly in New Zealand.
Fully in New Zealand. They didn't play much.
Yep.
Even Australia, against Australia, they played in New Zealand. Yeah.
No, even the semi-final was in New Zealand. I don't think they played any match in Australia.
No, they didn't.
Let me try and exploit the rule. He was straight away, fully conscious of what that means, and he was acting on it. So it's not like a trial and error that he arrived at by almost luck. It was a very direct response to a change in the rules of the game.
Yeah, but it was still a response that not many others went with. Right? I mean, it's not like Sri Lanka opened with Aravinda. I mean, Botham was definitely one sort of guy they asked, but every other team was doing the traditional thing, especially Pakistan won the World Cup. I mean, had Ramiz Raja at the top, just playing pretty much like you would play a test match until the new ball lost its shine.
True. No, I'm giving him credit. I'm comparing some of the other things that Martin Crowe did, and this was a very tactical and conscious tactical call. Deepak Patel could have been a gamble, right? It may have worked, may not have worked. If Srikkanth had hit him for 4 sixes and he never returned, that's a different story. But Greatbatch was in the sense that he was a captain who was already tuned on to how one one-day cricket is going to shape into.
He was. And also the bowling attack. I think the fact that he decided to go with 4 of those dibbly-dobbly bowlers, I mean, that also was a tactical thing, right? I mean, he went with Danny Morrison and Deepak Patel at 2 ends of the extreme. That was something else that many teams weren't doing there.
True. And to lead from the front, what a phenomenal World Cup he had, man. And I remember distinctly the experience of watching cricket in Australia and New Zealand was so contrasting, although there's a lot of commonality as well, but grounds are smaller, the crowds are more vibrant. And one of the lasting images of the World Cup is how crowds used to throng the stadium even before the last winning run could be hit, and Martin Crowe running away from the crowd.
Oh, yeah. And for me personally, I don't know about you, each one can probably list their preference, but that New Zealand jersey is my all-time favorite in that World Cup. I mean, if I had to choose one, it would be the New Zealand jersey. What about you guys?
Yeah, I always love the fun. And I remember not doing that, but much later, Crowe had, I don't know if it was an article or an interview that he had given where he said, he confessed that how he kind of fucked up that entire semi-final because he had thought that it was going to rain, which is why they batted first, and then he didn't come out to field, and he sent John Wright. John Wright was the acting captain on field because he thought it's anyway going to rain, the match is going to get cut short, and I'll just take some rest. I think he had pulled a muscle or something.
And then the physio told him that if you go out there now, there's a good chance that there are chances of playing in the final.
Yeah,
are almost nil. And Martin Crowe assumed that these guys are definitely going to go to the final, and he didn't want to miss the final. And then he says, that's the biggest regret, that I didn't go out there and lead the team on the field, assuming that we would make the final.
Right. And the one thing that struck me the most in that interview was how he said that he had actually laid out plan for the entire 50 overs. He had planned out all the bowling changes for the entire 50 overs before the start itself. And he had told John Wright, better do this. But then John Wright went out there and he used his own plans of attacking with Morrison and then delaying Harris and so on. And which is why, but then Crowe still says, it's still my fault, even though Wright changed my plans, but I should have been there and not. But I was fascinated, and I've always thought of that when I captain teams. I always think of that, how he had made plans. So he had made plans apparently that Inzi would come. And so in the first 4 overs of Inzi, we have to bowl Harris or someone at him so that we can get those overs out before we load up on him once he's set in. And things like that he had thought of. And I was surprised that, now we have so much technology and, people lay out plans and say, okay, to Rishabh Pant, you have to bowl here, to Andre Russell, you have to bowl here and all that. But in 92, without that much of footage and all that, he had laid out plans for the entire 50 overs, at least in the semi-final is what he had said.
But it's a little tricky, right? First of all, he was the first captain who was alert to the dynamism of the format and how the rule change is going to bring in more dynamism. But I think Martin Crowe did write a piece for Cricinfo much later, like just around the 2015 World Cup, talking about that and how we lived on to regret not taking the field. Yeah. And he kind of clarifies saying my issue is not so much with John Wright captaining, but more like even if we had lost, I should have been there and lost, so that would have given me a closure. The fact that I have to live with this thought that what if I had been on the field and that would have helped, which is what kept me hooked on to that regret for much longer.
Yeah, I think he wrote that after New Zealand, before the New Zealand South Africa semi-final in
correct. Yeah. Like an open letter to this guy, is it, or was it to an open letter to McCullum or something like that?
To McCullum kind of stuff. Yeah.
And isn't 2015 very similar for New Zealand in that sense that except for the final, they played all the matches at home, right?
Yeah, they did, correct.
So they basically took one step forward and went on to play a match in Australia, and that they lost in the first over itself.
They lost in the first over. Yeah, but Martin Crowe, I remember there was one innings against that New Zealand Zimbabwe match. He played quite like a berserk. He went berserk. It was a cut short by rain, and he made probably 40 odd balls. It was the thing was that it wasn't like mad hitting or something. It was pretty clean Martin Crowe stroke play, but he was just connecting every ball, and timing was so good, placement was so good, everything was just going. And that was, it was not the strongest of sides, but still, at that time, to see an innings at nearly 200 strike rate was quite something.
So in a way, it's similar to the 96 story, right? You have people talking about Jayasurya, but Aravinda was the man who really propelled Sri Lanka. And here a lot of people talk about Greatbatch, but of course in the 96 Jayasurya coverage is a little more disproportionate and a little more unfair than this.
Well, Jayasurya got the man of the tournament in 96, but luckily Martin Crowe got the man of the tournament in 92. So I think that is what is most glaring, right? I mean, it's not just what people remember. And I think most people who remember Greatbatch will concede that that was Martin Crowe's tournament after all. Greatbatch was
correct.
Like
there's no narrative fallacy around it. It's just people kind of come to senses quite immediately. Yeah, true.
Yeah, so in terms of other games, I mean, I just spoke of New Zealand, Zimbabwe, but it's amazing how the number of games that became thrilling, or in the end, the semi-final that became farcical because of the rain rule, right? I mean, you had so many of these games that suddenly you had the chasing team having to do some ridiculously crazy target.
I was thinking about it now. Before I was just checking some scorecards, and I realized why are they playing cricket in March in Australia? and then I went back and figured out when did they start that original Tri-Series and the India Test Series as well. So this was a season where cricket was going on from November till March.
Yeah, it was, and Australia were playing through it, and India also were playing through it.
No wonder there were so many rain delays or whatever, because during summer you don't get that many breaks. You watch every summer, we don't see so many rain interruptions, and so that was like today I learned kind of a moment for me. I was like, oh yeah, that must have been a really long summer. It's never struck me before.
Like of all the games we have spoken, like India Zimbabwe, one game that we spoke of was a rain delay. India Australia was rain delay. New Zealand Zimbabwe was rain delay. There was of course there was the famous England Pakistan game which was washed out, thankfully for Pakistan. There was that Pakistan South Africa game, if I'm not mistaken, which had a revised.
India Sri Lanka didn't happen at all.
The India Sri Lanka one was where the helicopter was used, right? First time ever, they brought a helicopter to try the pitch.
Yeah.
See, India, Australia, West Indies as well, right? All three teams were pretty much playing with the same team composition throughout the summer, right? Not many individual players changed from squad to squad. The crazier part is the India-Australia series. First they had the one-dayers, then they went into the tests, then they had one-dayers.
Tri-series.
The Tri-series, that's what, the Tri-series.
Yeah.
Then again, the World Cup. So this was such a transition, man. I don't think this kind of a thing would ever happen anymore.
And it strikes me the number of, medium pace, gentle bowlers who, and not so gentle, but, not like express quick, who did well in that World Cup. I mean, you had the whole New Zealand quartet who did well. You had this bowler, Merrick Pringle. I mean, he was pretty quick, but he wasn't like, I don't know, was he as quick as Donald? I don't think so, right?
No.
Yeah, he was more medium pace-ish. Then there was Edo Brandes, of course, who came
Edo Brandes had a very good World Cup.
He had a fantastic World Cup. And even like the England, you had Dermot Reeve and guys like that. Chris Lewis.
England had a pretty good bowling attack. There was Pringle, De Freitas, Gladstone Small,
Botham,
and Dermot Reeve.
Yeah, and Botham was having actually a pretty good World Cup with the ball at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, even though he was well past his prime as a bowler. Wasim, took over the final, but and he was quick, of course. But apart from that, I'm just looking at the stats, and I'm even seeing the name Chandika Hathurasinghe, who took 4 for 57 against West Indies. I'm like,
wow.
Do any of you remember that?
I don't remember that at all. In fact, I don't remember Hathurasinghe playing that World Cup at all. I remember Hathurasinghe from much later.
Wow. I mean, Sri Lanka had a bit of an upset in that. They had a couple of good games, right, in that World Cup. But overall, they were pretty disappointing. Overall, yeah, I guess.
The only Sri Lanka game I remember in the World Cup is the one against West Indies, because both teams scored 300. And
that's not West Indies.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
They had to chase 300, and they did that. And I remember all the boys in the colony were, saying, "Oh, 300, man, 300." I didn't know what it meant. But
that was the first time, right? First time a 300 was being chased in one day.
Yeah, and everyone in the colony was super crazy about it. Saying, "Man, this was the greatest game I've seen," and so on. And that's why I remember that a lot. And
but
later, during highlights, I watched that again.
Sorry, Mahesh?
I'm saying, was it telecast? Because it's a question that has bogged me quite a bit for over the years. In fact, very recently, just about a year back, somebody shared that on Twitter, a YouTube video of that game. And that was the first time I've seen videos of that. And I was so devastated to learn it's such a small cricket ground, The whole thing. I was so devastated. It's a small ground, man. Those runs are worth 250, not 312. Not even 250, I would say.
And I never, the only thing I sort of, until then, like just like you mentioned about Hamilton and that the moment that you connect with, if New Plymouth, this is the only thing that I had any connection with New Plymouth, right? And whenever I think of this New Plymouth, or I just think of this game, and then this game, the first thing that comes to my mind is this Atula Samarasekara, who made that 75, opening the batting, 70 out opening the batting. And I'm like, first of all, one team scores 300. And then these guys chase it with a guy, Atula Samarasekara, opening the batting. I'm like, what the hell happened there, man? Like, something seriously crazy is going on there.
So do you guys remember watching that at that time? Because I have not watched it years.
I do not remember watching it, but after everyone in the building, in the colony spoke, I remember watching the highlights, the week later or something like that.
So you remember watching the highlights, which means it was broadcast.
Yeah, I remember watching the highlights because that's when I first remember the word turquoise, and we used to try to bowl like him.
The Srikkanth.
Non-Tricos, yeah. And actually, a lot of those guys in that Zimbabwe team, they all played for a long time. I mean, Dave Horton, Andy Pycroft, Tricos, Waller, Arnott. I mean, that was a really, that was the CSK of 1992, I guess.
Flower was there.
Oh, yeah. Flower was there.
Flower scored 100 in this game, no? The one that we were talking about, he scored 100.
Yeah, he scored 100.
Okay. Yeah.
And all of them pretty much played the 87 World Cup. And in 87 as well, Zimbabwe, had a couple of really good performances. I mean, they, again, made a big score against New Zealand in Hyderabad, had a good made a good impression. I won't say had a good World Cup, but made a good impression. So it was good to see the same players again. And against India, this guy Ali Shah came and just hammered the Indian bowling. Good, that left-handed sort of elegance he had about. Yeah.
Speaking of left-handed elegance, this was Lara's first World Cup, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And he was an opener, wasn't he?
Yeah. He opened. That's one distinct game that I remember, the Pakistan West Indies game. As you're saying,
he was the man of the match, right?
Yeah. He retired, but he still got the man of the match. But again, so that I don't know whether he lit up the World Cup or anything, but that was his first World Cup.
No, he didn't do much actually. He, West Indies overall were pretty tepid in that World Cup. I mean, they started well, but I don't think they really lived up to what was expected of them after that. Yeah, and Lara, I guess he had I guess what he did after that so eclipsed what he did in this World Cup that it isn't really remembered. But maybe if you look at the West Indies stats from that particular World Cup, for all you know, he's probably the leading run scorer or something. Who knows?
No, I think Lara...
West Indies had a terrible summer at large, right? They didn't even make it to the Tri-Series finals, in which India was the third team.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, they
and I remember that 126 where they couldn't chase, right? It was a tie.
Tie. Yeah. They had a tough time. And Malcolm Marshall, in fact, played the initial match.
He did?
Yeah, he played that World Series. Of course, I remember watching him bowl in that World Series.
He played a few games in the World Cup as well.
He even played a few games in the World Cup. And then there was that West Indies-New Zealand game, which was his last, nobody knew it was his last game. I mean, he played that game and he didn't play after that. And then I remember Tony Cozier was there. And some 2 games late, people, somebody in the commentary box is like, Tony, have you seen Malcolm Marshall play his last game for the West Indies? And he's like, Mako hasn't said anything, but I think you're right. I think he's done. I'm like, this guy just retired for him. What the hell?
Wow.
Yeah, and you could get away with all that at that time, right? Because, of course, Tony Cozier is such a revered figure, and he would probably get away with anything, even if he were alive today. But I'm just saying, something like that happens now, and it would be like Twitter would feast on it for a couple of days.
So I remember that Richards not making the World Cup squad was a
huge controversy.
Big controversy, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I distinctly remember is, so my brother had gotten married a few months before that. And there was I still remember that during the wedding, there was when someone came and said, Richards will not be part of the West Indies team anymore because he was caught smoking some drugs or something. For the next few days, it was like hot, but we couldn't. I don't even know who started the rumor there, but and then when he was not made part of the squad, everybody said, at least people in my family said that was the reason why he didn't make it. But that was I think him not making the squad was a big deal at that point.
No, I mean, he writes about it in his book, about the marijuana especially, where I think, I don't know if it's because of that that he was dropped from the World Cup. I think it had something to do with the form. But at some stage, the board did raise this issue with him. And he believed that it helped him. I think there was a particular illness that he was going through and that was just not getting cured. And somebody suggested this. And he tried this. And since then, he's been a very strong advocate of legalizing marijuana. And he says it's of immense health benefit with pretty much no side effect. He does have his partiality to marijuana, but I don't think that was the reason for...
Well, the official version is that Richards basically told the board that I'm going to retire. I don't want to play tests anymore. And I don't even want to play one-dayers, but I want to play that World Cup. That's basically, that was what he said. He set the terms. And then the board said, hey, what is this? You're sort of picking and choosing. And they said, if you're going to retire, just retire. I mean, we don't want you in any form. And if you're not going to play one-dayers, we can't then suddenly bring you into the World Cup party. That is the generally accepted official version. But I know there's a lot of this innuendo around the marijuana. Coming to the biggest story of the World Cup, at that time, I guess it was just the fact that I was too young and I had no idea about any of this political thing. And even in the South, it's largely different from the North, where we are totally insulated, largely at least, from the whole India-Pakistan animosity. But almost all of us were really cheering Pakistan by the end of it. I mean, towards when they beat New Zealand in the league game, it was a big deal. And, we were all talking about it, and we were, talking about the semi-final, and then that miraculous victory in the semi-final. I remember going crazy, watching it. And I was pumping my fists, and I was really so happy that Pakistan, I love New Zealand. As I said, I love their jersey, I love Martin Crowe, everything. But just to see that Pakistan chase, by the 1992 standards, what Miandad and Inzamam pulled off was quite phenomenal. Miandad was the more sedate partner, but Inzamam just unleashed some craziness, man.
Yeah, they were 140 for 4 or something, right? When Ijaz Ahmed got out?
Yeah, it was, I can look up the scorecard now, but all I remember is it was by 1992 standards, you could call that by what it would now be like a 12 and over or 13 and over kind of an ask. That was the kind of ask that they were up against. It was insane.
Yeah, but everybody talks about Inzi's performance in those couple of games, right, towards the end. But looks like Miandad had a very good World Cup. He had 5 50s.
Yeah.
And that was one reason why, the rain affected games and all that, but that was one reason why they went that far. And I don't think, I'm pretty sure, knowing that Imran retired soon after the World Cup or at the end of the World Cup, and they were not in good terms. All that happening in that World Cup was great. It was...
But Miandad is not to be like that, right?
Imran had retired before the World Cup, and then he came back saying, I will do this World Cup, and he played the World Cup and then retired again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was basically, he said this will be his swan song. Yeah. Miandad also, there's that famous thing at the end of the presentation ceremony where Miandad was pissed off that Imran just went on to talk about this cancer hospital and talk about everything, and rather than talk about the team itself. So, and Miandad has told everyone possible about how pissed off he is with that.
Yeah, but all that, do you remember watching the presentation? Because I remember the Ramiz Raza catch at the end, and then we were all jumping up in joy. At least some of us. There was some of the other guys were strongly anti-Pakistan for some reason. So I don't remember watching the presentation ceremony or even him kind of holding the cup or whatever.
Something about that attack. You had everything ranging from the sublime to the ridiculous, right? You had bowlers like Iqbal Sikandar. Do you guys remember him? And then you had, I think Iqbal Sikandar might have even played against India in that match. And
they had a fifth bowler problem. No, Amir Sohail bowled. I remember a lot of games Amir Sohail was bowling. Salim Malik, I think, also bowled.
Legendary dibbly-dobbly from Pakistan, Salim Malik.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Was it the India game? I'm not sure. I remember watching Salim Malik bowl. Pretty pathetic to watch. But yeah, they had that whip bowl problem. But still, because the Akib, Akram, and Mushtaq were so phenomenal, they were able to. Because Imran Khan also was, he wasn't great or anything with the ball.
He was quite poor, actually.
Yeah, he was quite poor, and they didn't have Waqar in that World Cup. So actually, looking at the lineup, I mean, by Pakistan standards, that was actually a pretty weak bowling attack. I mean, so still to have won the World Cup, it shows the kind of magic that they could conjure as and when it was required. The other thing I remember was that in the final, it was like in how completely different it was from 96, right? It was 92 final. It's like Imran and Javed just decided to absolutely chill out in the early overs. Like they lost some wickets, and then these two guys are like just tuk, like classic tuk. Because they're almost like they're thinking, okay, Inzamam's going to come and then he'll take care of it. It's like, okay, let's just chill out for 20 overs.
But that's how they're playing throughout the World Cup, actually, even before Inzi kind of fired up in the semi-finals. Predominantly, when Imran came up every time, he was just consolidating to begin with.
But wasn't the final about Akram more than Inzi?
Both Inzi and Akram.
Okay.
Yeah, Akram right in the end, and then Inzi also, I think Inzi might have made... I mean, they got to 249, I remember. And
he finishes off with a flourish. And in fact, even Mushi bowls quite well, right? In fact, that was the first time I learned what is a googly. The googly that he bowls, if I'm not Graham Hick, where he gets LBW.
That was a fantastic ball. Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, I just went back to that semi-final, and Pakistan needed 123 in 15 overs, right? Now that by 1992 standards, you're looking at 8 an over, with 6 in hand. I mean, and against New Zealand, who had been near unbeaten through the World Cup. That was something. I mean, to watch those last 15 overs, it was insane. That was crazy. But talking about the 92 World Cup final itself, I mean, England were in a pretty good position with Lamb and Fairbrother in there, right? I mean, they were I wouldn't say cruising, but they were close to that.
True.
Yeah. So again, I mean, it's
thinking of that. When Imran calls back Wasim in 36th over or something. The reason why, I mean, I distinctly remember the way he gets both them out in the first spell with the new ball. And in fact, even that's a similar delivery in terms of line and length. Right? These 2 wickets, I'm thinking it's almost impossible with the later conditions that we had of using one ball in both ends. But because they were using 2 new balls, this is still relatively good shape for Akram to come and kind of get that purchase from the wicket.
And also, I think the fact that he told him, Imran supposedly tells him that forget about go for wickets, forget about runs and all that. I mean, adds to that whole aura around those 2 balls. I mean, of course, the 2 balls themselves speak for themselves. Absolutely majestic. I mean, I prefer for me personally, the Lamb ball is just number 1. I think the Lewis ball might have helped it along with an edge, but the Lamb ball was just something. And here you're talking about a guy who's batting on 30, 31, and he's one of the really experienced one-day players. Oh man, it's like you got to have dreamed it up and thought it a million times, and he then bowls it. Damn.
Talking of capturing those clutch moments. This is peak, right?
I mean, it's like fantasy, right? I mean, that's why you often think of, imagine being being that Wasim Akram fan who's watched him from when he was a kid. I mean, not even a fan. Imagine Wasim Akram's childhood coach, or Wasim Akram's, the guy who first saw Wasim Akram play cricket and spotted him and said this guy can play in the under 11s or something, and imagine that guy sitting and watching that ball. Dude, that's it. Your life is peaked. Stop.
Yeah. I mean, only for Wasim Akram it could get better from there.
Exactly. It gets better also.
You have to be a Wasim Akram to be. I mean, otherwise you will be a Joginder Sharma, right?
It's almost for me, it was from that. I mean, until that moment, Akram was obviously phenomenal. But I think after that, there was a certain fear with Akram, right? I mean, and it continued. I mean, until 99, 2003, even 2003 World Cup, whenever
Yeah, he had a
Akram,
fabulous start, right? Again, against Australia, he had a really good start. He gets 3 wickets in pretty quick time, right?
yeah, and I was like, whenever Akram bowled, especially against India, I was shit scared. That's the kind of fear that guy could get in you, right? Not so much Waqar. I mean, I don't know why, because Waqar himself was a phenomenal bowler. But Akram, I guess, had this magic that he could conjure that just made you like, oh God, he's going to get you. And 99 India Chennai Test is a classic example, right? I mean, Akram like comes and gets that play LBW, he gets that great Dravid wicket, and he just does it all the time.
But that's the thing, right? Like a lot of people, if you ask them, right, they may hate a lot of Pakistani cricketers, but when it comes to Akram, a lot of people are, I don't know, more forgiving, or Imran. But everyone else, like Miandad, Shoaib, Imzi, people might hate and dislike, but people are very forgiving when it comes to Akram or Imran.
Akram doesn't do anything other than just bowl. He just they keep saying, hey, let the ball do the talking. That's all he does, right? People hate players like Miandad and Moin Khan, another person, because these guys are, in addition to playing the game, they're also constantly chirping, doing other shit that drives people up. Akram, on the other hand, and probably Imran, because he's in a completely different sphere of society or whatnot, where he's born and brought up to be polite and all that. But Akram, on the other hand, just bowls. That's all he does. And I think interesting that Sidvi also talks about why Waqar is not held in the same level of reverence.
But Akram had such wide variety of skills. He had so many gears. He could bowl off 5 paces and still get balls.
Exactly.
So much.
And he could bat, right? He could bat really well.
I mean, that doesn't matter. With Akram, it's really about what he does with the ball. How can you talk of Pakistan's World Cup win without talking about Rambo?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, didn't Rambo get out to a no ball in the final?
Yeah, he gets. I think he goes for a square cut or something. And in fact, I think the fielder tries to run him out as well, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, the fielder tries to run him out. I think it was Pringle was the bowler, Derek Pringle. And gives a catch to probably Graham Hick or something, and then it was probably Hick who tried to run him out, and it didn't work.
No, Rambo scored a very important 100 against New Zealand in that league game as well, right?
Oh yeah. Rambo, that league game, is overshadowed by the semi-final and the final, but I think it deserves far, far more importance in the history of that World Cup. Be the only team to go to New Zealand to win that final league game, and when New Zealand very well, of course, a lot depended on the Australia-West Indies result, but New Zealand had a good idea that if they lose this game, they're going to play Pakistan in Auckland. They were so good by sticking to the conventional. I mean, in fact, when everyone went in one direction, Pakistan would go in the other direction. Like 99 World Cup, they sent Abdul Razak to go and just hang in there as the pinch blocker. And the same thing in 92. I mean, everyone was trying this pinch hitter and all that, and all the other teams are being sucked into it. But they just went the other way and they said, we'll do it our way. And I think that was really admirable. Other teams were just half-assing it. Pakistan said, okay, do your thing. We'll do our thing. And they did it. I mean, okay, they had luck going their way and all that. That's all true. But to actually, and I think that's where Imran's sort of, the Imran's greatness comes in as well, right? I mean, he won't be Imran if he were to try and ape Martin Crowe. So he's Imran because he's Imran. So I think that's the sort of that's something that a great captain can bring as well. And it's amazing how that particular World Cup, I think it's sort of, Imran had done so much in his career, right? Before that, he'd been playing for so long, but how that particular moment, probably because it was his final cricketing sort of thing, or the World Cup, everything, that is now what defines him pretty much. I mean, people talk about Imran, they talk about the World Cup, and then they talk about everything else, when in fact he has
that is so problematic, right? I mean, he has all the record in the world to stake claim to be the greatest cricketer of all time. if you can make a case for Gary Sobers to be the greatest, you can make an easily good case for Imran Khan to be the greatest of all time. I don't know, was it Osman who wrote a piece on Cricinfo about basically interviewing the players who were part of the squad about the mid-inning speech that Imran gave? There were some people who found it very inspiring, and there were some people who said, he just said something and I didn't even understand. I just went.
They didn't even hear it.
Yeah, Akid Javed or Mushtaq, one of them said I didn't even hear it properly. And the guy has one of the greatest test records of all time. Plus, he's been a great captain for Pakistan who went to West Indies and at their peak and challenged. Of course, it's glorified. I'm not denying it, and there's a lot of reason. It's like 2003 99 World Cup. It's not like Steve Waugh's Australians were cruising. They also, they carried 0 points coming into the Super 6, and they had to win all the matches, and they won and went through. So I can understand why, let's say, that's glorified. But when you look back at Steve Waugh's career, that is not the defining point of anything. You're talking about Steve Waugh's test career more than anything else, or his test captaincy reign and the juggernaut Australian test team of that time more than his World Cup victory.
And that Sabina Park 100.
The double 100.
But let's put it this way. If New Zealand had won that World Cup, it would have, and I guess then even now Martin Crowe is remembered for that World Cup, but I guess he would have been even more glorified for that World Cup, right? But I think the difference there is that if you compare Imran's career and Martin Crowe's career, Imran's achievement go far beyond that World Cup. But for Martin Crowe, that World Cup was probably on par with several of his other achievements.
That could have been the peak. But with Imran, it is very unfair to define this as a peak.
We cannot end this podcast without talking about the greatest India-Pakistan game.
Oh, yeah.
I think we have.
No, see, there's other things. Yeah, there's other things that we haven't really spoken about as well. Jonty Rhodes' impact in the tournament.
Okay.
This is where it all began, right? The legend of Jonty began in this tournament. If I remember, there were 2 runouts. One was Inzi, but there was one runout, I think, that was previous to this, the one game prior to this as well, I think. But I'm not able to find the video. I distinctly remember there were 2 runouts. But only Inzi's, is still in our memories.
But I think that Inzi runout, first of all, I don't remember much of South Africa in the league stages of the tournament. Perhaps because they played a lot of day-night games and I was away in school, or perhaps because for whatever reason. I do remember catching a bit of highlights, and I think the India-South Africa game, Peter Kirsten played a good innings. So I remember seeing that. But this Jonty Rhodes run out of Inzamam, he didn't really need to run, right? I mean, he could have done any number of things to get that run out. But I think what glorifies that moment is the fact that he chose to go with what he did. And that's like, I keep thinking about it, as a fielder. I mean, Jonty didn't seem like a guy who, obviously at that point of time, you're not thinking of things like showing off and all that. But I'm just thinking, you get the ball, you have this guy to run out, and one of the slowest, not like the greatest runners between the wicket. And then he chooses to actually dive full length to break the stumps. I'm like, whoa. It's not even full length. It's probably like 3 times full length, right? Because that's how much.
Yeah, he was flying.
He was just flying.
So I have a slightly different opinion about that, Sibi, because see, the thing is, we know now on hindsight that Inzi is not one of the better. Was never a good runner, but that was probably the first time he was playing. South Africa was playing Inzi, and he probably had not seen enough of Inzi before. The other thing is, Jonty Rhodes has had a number of runouts where he has taken a shy at the stumps from point. In a lot of times it has been at the non-striker's end, not at the striker's end. So this time, right? So I think he could have, thrown it underarm, but he was still running. So, and if he had time to do an overarm throw, I think then throwing down the stump would have been a better alternative. But I think since he did not have the time to do that and he had only an underarm throw that was possible, I think he's just trying to maximize his chances by going full length. But even after doing that, right, Inzi was just out of the crease. It was not a comfortable run out at all.
I think another thing is that it was the angle, because he only had one stump there, because he was
one stump to look at, yes,
perpendicularly, right? So he was looking only at one stump, and so in his mind he must have because like you're saying, when he's from point when he's going to non-striker, he can see 3 stumps, but this way he was only looking at one stump, which is why I think he chose to fly into the stumps.
Yeah, and also which brings me to the photographic element of that World Cup. That Jonty flying to the stumps.
Wasn't there a Sports Star center spread on that?
Yeah, I have that, I think.
There definitely was. And almost like every morning you open the newspaper to like a pretty good photo, if not a great photo. And even while watching on TV, you have all the banners, and you have there was a lot of photographic elements to that whole World Cup compared to all the previous editions. I mean, so I think Jonty flying is definitely up there, and that was a phenomenal photograph. I mean, I don't know who took it, but there was that one photo that has the full effect of that leap, and those were some really phenomenal photographs of that moment.
Can we now talk about the greatest game?
Well, I didn't watch much of the greatest game because it was a school day.
What?
I didn't, because it was a school day, and I came back. I remember I came back towards the last bit of it, but I distinctly remember that Srinath balled to Miandad. I think it was a Yorker, but some people have told me it's not a Yorker and that Miandad made it into a Yorker. I missed that whole Miandad More exchange totally. I mean, I only saw it later and heard about it and all that. So yeah, maybe you guys should talk about that game rather than me.
Well, that game was the Ajay. I had never heard of Ajay Jadeja before, and that was the first time I had heard of. I heard of Ajay Jadeja, and so I remember that game for that reason. And then, of course, the Srinath putting Miandad out of his misery, because I think they lost also because of Miandad, because they had to score. They had to score like 200 something, 218, 220, but Miandad was the one who was completely farming the strike. He was not able to touch anything. He was getting angry at everyone, and he was reverse swearing people. So Srinath basically put him out of his misery.
I remember that from the, see, that's what, so like Sydney, I was also at school. So I caught Pakistan's innings at home when I got back. And so those are the things that I remember from that game. Miandad's dismissal by Srinath, Srikkanth's catch. And I remember having seen Miandad's jumping up and down live. But curiously, afterwards, in the highlights, they never used to show that.
And yeah, his whole tussle with More was interesting, because like Raju was bowling and therefore More was standing up, and his whole egging on of Raju was pissing off Miandad. I mean, yeah. The fact was Miandad was not able to get back to ball, and he was not able to time things. He was already pissed off at himself, and then with More egging Raju more and more, completely lost his.
Yeah, one thing is that back at the time, that was the first time India and Pakistan were playing in the World Cup. So before the game, all the talk was about that how surprising it is that there have been so many World Cups played so far. 4 World Cups played, and India and Pakistan have never played against each other. And in fact, the 87 World Cup, there was a big hope that they would play the final in Eden Gardens. And everyone, when they made the semi-final, everyone was hoping for an India-Pakistan final. Never happened. So yeah, this was the first time they were playing. So that was quite big. But all the, it's only subsequently that this whole India-Pakistan World Cup record and all, has gathered a new meaning. But at that time, it was not like, that big a deal. It was like, okay, it's the first time, great, they're playing and all. But, and I remember at the end of the World Cup, a lot of people were saying that, okay, Pakistan won the World Cup, but India beat Pakistan. So taking some delight in the fact that we'd beaten Pakistan in the World Cup, as if that made India world champions or something like that. Okay, so that was the 1992 World Cup podcast on 81 All Out. We tried to cover as much as we could, but as always, there was plenty of more memories and plenty of more themes to discuss. I'm sure all our listeners can chip in either in the comment section or on Twitter, or if you want, do your own recording and send it to us. We'll be happy to share it with everyone on social media. As always, you can follow us on iTunes and Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts, or you can listen to us on our website 81allout.com. And we hope to bring you more World Cup related podcasts, and keep listening. Thank you.
In the air, Srikkanth takes it. India win.
He'll come back for the second. India have won the Test match.